For the book review assignment, sometimes students are a little confused about what I'm asking for when I talk about critical writing or a critical review. My intention is that you're not necessarily negative about everything in the book. The important thing, as with almost all of your classes at the university level, is that you critically analyze what you're taking in, what you're learning, and you're constantly assessing it and asking questions, sometimes for a second or a third time. In front of you is a chart that has the difference between descriptive writing and critical analytical writing. And I make this distinction at the beginning of the book review because the descriptive writing side is going to take place with an assignment that's going to be due next week. That is the timeline. And you'll see how this fits nicely into that timeline description. And then the book review that is far more critical and analytical. So if we're looking at the critical analytical side of things, which is what you're concerned with on the book review, these are the types of statements that you should be making in your book review will identify the significance of what the author is doing, will evaluate strengths and weaknesses. It'll weigh one piece of information or maybe one chunk of the book against another. You will make reasoned judgments. You will argue cases according to the evidence. You can show why something is relevant or suitable. And sometimes you'll identify when something is appropriate or suitable. In other words, you might say that a piece of evidence doesn't necessarily fit into the author's analysis. One of the things, of course, in any book is the order of the chapters, so identifying why the timing of something is particularly important, weighing the importance of the component parts. I realize that I'm reading this to you, but I'll make this available if you want to look at it a second time, but I want to make sure that it was large enough that you could read it yourself. But I think you get the idea here that on the critical analytical side, that you are not so much describing what happened, but rather you're trying to take apart the author's argument and to assess it for structure and for reason. And at the end of it, of course, you'll draw your own conclusions. Now, that doesn't mean that I've ignored the descriptive side of things, because when we work on your the timeline, that's where you're going to be able to throw in all those descriptive things that you found. You're going to state what happens. You're going to give the story in chronological order. You're going to give lists of things, say something when something occurs. In your timeline, you might even take the dates and group them into different eras so that we can see the difference between an earlier era, a middle era, and a later era. Stating options, listing details, right? Anything that's in a list of any order is descriptive, and things that state the links between the items, which of course a timeline does, and of course giving information. Now, these types of skills are important no matter what field you are in at the university, and in fact at the bottom I give you my source for this chart, and it's an introduction to business research methods. But this type of list you are going to find in almost any field of endeavor, to think critically, to think deeper, and to question. So when you are looking at your critical analytical writing in the book review assignment, it is as if you are looking at a forest from 30,000 feet, and you are making those judgments of the forest based on that larger, higher altitude view. That's the first part of the assignment. Part 2 is I want you to look at a specific page in the book and that particular evidence and how it relates to the whole. And so I compare this to an automobile where the book review part 1 is the car, right? You're describing what a car does, what a car is, the functions of the car, all that sort of stuff. But then in the second part, you take a specific component of the car and you tell me how it relates to the whole. Now, you folks have chosen a wide variety of books for this assignment, and that's wonderful, and that's exactly my intent. But it also means that that page 131 is going to have a different role in each one of your books. So some of you might get, to use my car analogy, a steering wheel, something that is absolutely vital to the argument that's being made by the author. You cannot drive a car without a steering wheel. At least you can't now, maybe in 5 years or so. Or you may get something like a radio, something, or CD player, or whatever, something that will assist the car, but is not necessarily vital for the car's running. It's a great piece of information. It's a wonderful anecdote. It builds on this particular idea, right, that driver awareness makes the driving experience better. Whatever. My point is that page 131 is going to play a different role. So so make sure that you include that in the final assignment. Just a side note here, if you have any sort of problem copying that attachment that is the image to the assignment, just go ahead and copy and paste it into a Word document, an independent Word document, and then upload that to the assignment link, because you can link more than one document at a time. Final point here on the book review. Some of you have chosen a topic that fits very nicely into the eras that were described in the assignment. In other words, that 4-decade window, your book fits right in there. For you, you're going to take the information from the book review and you're going to translate that into the timeline, and virtually everything you do from here on out relates to the entire book, and that's wonderful and good. You won't have to make any adjustments at all because of the fact that your book fits nicely into the time period. For those of you who are doing a book that has a wider scope, in other words, it goes beyond those 4 decades and covers different eras both before and after, when you do your book review, I want you to do the book review on the entire book, not just on that little narrow area, those 3 chapters that are most focused on the era that we're examining for this class. So do the book review on the entire book. Then when you start to build the timeline, when you assess the primary documents, when you start building the history in a box, you are only going to use those 3 or 4 chapters that fit nicely into our era. And I think that's the last thing that I want to say regarding structure. This assignment, by necessity, gives students wide latitude, and that's why I was so careful during the application process to get you a book that would help you to be successful and help you to learn what you wanted to learn. But it also makes it an assignment that has to be somewhat flexible in the instructions. So that's the reason for the lengthy instructions. Please give me a phone call if you're having difficulty, and we can work through issues together to make sure that you get what you need out of this assignment. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing your work on the book reviews.